Hey guys, this is Emily, and you are about to watch a clip from episode number 14 of Playing the Glass Bead Game with myself and Michael Wan. This was a really cool episode. It was super fun to be back with Michael after we had a week off in between, but it felt like we hadn't seen each other in forever. And so it was really fun to be back and just kind of, be in that energy that we really enjoy. But this was a really cool episode because I think we're starting to get somewhere with aligning some of these experiences we have with actual processes or projects that maybe we were part of, or maybe that we have the sort of skill set that matches up to, right? And so in this case, we were talking about an experience I had where I met somebody who was able to point me in the direction of a document that basically details a program or a procedure that seems to match up to experiences that I have had, including this sort of very interesting sort of time tunnel that I've been detailing that seems to have existed for me between the first time I lived in Austin and right now. And we start to identify some things that exist in both space and time that seem to be markers, either in terms of physical places that exist, or just in terms of terms and ideas that seem to pop up all around me in both the spatial and temporal dimensions here in Austin. And I know that sounds like a word salad, but you'll see as we go into the episode. You'll see in the episode why I'm explaining it that way. This is just the opening clip as Michael and I kind of get warmed up for another round of gameplay here. But if you guys are interested in joining us for the experience or for all of the episodes, you can do so by signing up patreon.com/off-planet-media at the Project Kids level. Or if you're interested in just the content only, you can go to projectkids.locals.com. Also, each episode is available for individual purpose. And if you have not yet received a complimentary episode of the Glass Bead Game, you can contact me at the email address below, and I will be happy to either send you the first episode or just one episode of your choosing. If this one sounds particularly interesting to you, then this can be the one, or whichever one you like. Also, if you would like a free day at the Project Kids Social Club, you can reach out to me for that experience as well. We have lots of cool things coming down the pipe, including a live event, hopefully sometime later this year. There's going to be a Project Kids shop popping up soon that will have some glass bead game swag and whatnot. And we would love for you guys to come hang out, join the gang, and play the game with us. It's starting to get really interesting. So enjoy the clip from Gateway 21. And I understand it's episode 14, but it's Gateway 21. And you will see why in the episode. All right. I hope everybody has a lovely day. Catch you next time. Bye-bye. Go. Hey, everybody, welcome back. I'm Emily Moyer. My co-host, Michael Wan, is with me. And we have a problem here because in episode number 13, you said nobody cares about number 14. And now we find ourselves at episode number 14 of Playing the Glass Bead Game. How you doing, buddy?
So, I don't even know where to begin because now I'm caught up in nobody caring about number 14. Because you're right, I said that. And one of the things, because I say a lot of stuff. And sometimes, you don't want to go and get in the habit of contradicting yourself. And I said, no one cares about 14. And here we're at 14. And I think this is going to be some stuff to care about. So I don't know how we can approach this. How do we approach it?
I'm 100% sure this is going to be some stuff to care about because I think we're actually going to break some ground on this episode. So we are going to change the position that 14 has held for all of history as not as interesting as number 13, and we are going to move 14 from nobody cares about it to fuck yeah 14, dude.
Yeah, and someone just downloaded in my brain. They're like, it's 5. Stop thinking 14. Just say 5, dude. And so to that person, I'm like, I hear you. But I agree with you, Emily. I think this is going to be special. This is special number 14. It's like that cousin who no one really knows in the family reunion, and they're kind of strange and on the outskirts. No one talks to them. And then 20 years later, they're the most fascinating, world, influencing in whatever their field is. You're like, God, that cousin, that person, that's number 14. They're going to want to overlook 14, but it's going to turn out to be something you could never imagine. That's my thought. We'll see. Ask me if that holds true at the end of our conversation.
All right. Sounds good. So, Mike, this is like, it was 2 weeks ago today we did the last show, but it feels like forever because we had a week off because I was traveling and whatnot. But it was like, it almost feels like I haven't heard from you or talked to you or anything in like a month. And it's been 2 weeks since we talked.
It does feel like a long time.
Yeah.
And a lot has changed. A lot has changed in this time on many, many, many levels, like personal life and outer life and all that sort of stuff. And so I'll speak about this to myself, or about myself, excuse me. So in this period, we went through the closing end of an eclipse cycle. They're like usually 2 eclipses in a solar year, and the eclipse, 2 eclipse cycles. You got you got one and then you get one 2 weeks later. And that happens usually twice in a calendar year. So we just went through one. And so without getting into too much of what does an eclipse mean? It's easier just to say, I recognize this as a marker, it's a threshold. It's a harbinger. What's that? I never know how to pronounce it. Harbinger. It's the G like that. A harbinger. Doesn't that mean it's it's an announcing? It's announcing something to come. So that's kind of what the eclipses are. So that's in general. We see that. But for those of you who are familiar with your own unique relationship to this environment we're having this human experience in. And what I mean by that is in a body standing on the ground with those heavens above you. You carry around this time date stamp of what the heavens look like when you were born. The astrology folks will call that a natal chart. And so you've got these positions in your natal chart. And there's all this stuff always going around or happening in real time, all the planets are moving and all that sort of stuff. And whenever that's in the same place as one of these key points on your natal chart, there's a zing, oh, this is happening, or this is another marker. But of all the markers, arguably the most interesting is that of the eclipse. Because the eclipse is all about alignment. An eclipse happens, who knows what the hell Earth, moon, sun are. But what happens is when they're in a certain alignment, you get an eclipse, there's that you don't see the sun or you don't see the moon. So it's all about alignment. That's they talk about it being very destiny oriented when you look at the natal chart with the nodes. The nodes correspond with eclipses. So all that being said, when an eclipse hits one of your personal spots, that's an even bigger marker. You should start looking for changes. And so if you were to guess, based upon all of the people who are in this conversation right now, so that's primarily me and you and Laura listening in the background, which one of us can we say for certain had that eclipse occur on a very, very significant location in their natal chart?
It has to be you.
It has to be me. Right. I'm setting you up. That is correct. So this eclipse, which just occurred, it happened right on my sun and my moon. I was born when there's a full moon. How do you know that? Because your sun is opposite your moon. And on that line, it makes a line. On that same line is where the eclipse happened. So according to all traditional wisdom, that would mean that it is a very significant time for anyone who's got that placement, which would be yours truly. And so you said to me, Michael, this has been the longest we have not spoken to each other since we began speaking. And you are true. And this is the first time, this might be the first time that definitely since I've known my natal chart, that the eclipse has happened upon my sun and my moon. And so, yeah, I went dark. I disappeared, and I didn't do it on purpose. It is just what happened naturally with the unfolding of life. And so that's kind of where I'm coming into this conversation from.
All right, so let's hear about this fated journey of darkness that you right?
Let's call it alignment. Alignment. I've been particularly as it relates to, we're having this dance, we're talking, the people are listening, we're living our lives, all of that stuff is happening out on the computer boxes, which they're telling us is life. And all of this stuff is like kind of changing. We're in a really weird time right now. Like, something's we're in that like quiet, like it's too quiet, right? It's like, what do you mean everyone gets to take off their masks right now? Like what's coming? So we're in that lull. And on a personal level, I would suggest like, this is, all of us are in this placement now to kind of like catch our breath and to really, really like, become more conscious on like, what direction do I want to go? This past year has like kind of played out however it has. We find ourselves right here. Like, what do you want to do? And I certainly found myself in that. Like, what do I want to friggin' do? What do I want to friggin' do? So, all right. And that's been like, probably like, I would say like 2 or 3 weeks, like leading up to the eclipse. And really, I would say, this and going through that. So this is about a month period. I've been kind of like sitting in that place of like real stillness, like, and with stillness, how does that translate into like a regular, like, regular life? It means I don't want to do fucking anything. When you don't want to do anything, that is your inner world telling you to rest, to do nothing. Because when your inner world wants you to do something, you're like, oh, I got all the stuff I want to do. And there's not enough hours in the day. So it's like recognizing your own kind of inner cycle. So to me, like, I like to surrender to that. So I kind of surrendered into that. So all of this is just the preface. I'm giving you a preface. So I don't know, like, let's say 3 months ago, I'm contacted by a guy who I guess has seen some of like the work I do on YouTube, which I don't do with you. And he booked a session with me. And we had like a nice conversation. Like, hell, man, I don't even care what you got to say. I just want to have a conversation. I can't even believe I'm paying money to have a conversation. And I'm thinking, I can't even believe people are paying money to have a conversation with me. This is unbelievable. Right? So we have this really, really nice conversation, and we kind of like, we hit it off. I hit it off, I think, with almost anyone who I ever have a session with. But his and my dynamic, or at least in the session, was a little bit different than what the typical one would be. It was literally just a conversation, nothing more than that. So the guy's like, hey, I'm heading out east this summer. And I'm going to be driving through Pennsylvania. I'm like, well, why don't you swing by? Let's go and, we'll spend some time. So that was this week. This guy shows up. And there's always a little bit of a rolling of a dice if you do something like that. I periodically, like, if you put yourself out there in shows like this, you're undoubtedly going to be contacted by people, and like, you gotta decide like what you're going to do. And for the most part, I usually don't. I have like a real easy boundary, which is I just don't even respond, because I don't want to have to go and pick and choose. Like, I just say no or like ignore. But every once in a while, like, I'm like, all right, let's go see what comes in. This is how Jesse, like me and Jesse, that's how that unfolded. So the guy shows up completely different. 100% different than the picture I envisioned in my mind. Mm-hmm. And as soon as this guy shows up, like, I've met this man before. And I don't mean this literally. I mean, I guess we could say that like metaphysically. We want to go in that metaphysical line. I mean, we're all that. So I'm going to talk just like mundane reality. Like, I haven't met this guy like this guy. But there's this other guy who had been in my life. Like, let's say about, I don't know, like 5 or 6 years ago. So when I used to live in Marietta, one of my favorite things in Marietta was this tavern. It was the greatest tavern in all of Lancaster. It was called Shank's Tavern. It's the oldest continuous tavern in Lancaster County, and it's been in operation since 1812. It's right on the river. It's haunted as can be, and it gets the strangest mix of people. And it used to be like half a block from where I lived in Marietta. And I would like to go down, like, my normal routine is like, particularly when it was warm out, like I would ride my bike. And then when I was done riding my bike, Yeah, there we go. That's it. That's the place. So I mean, look at all this. Go to the black and white picture. That one with the people sitting down. Yes, that one right there. That was probably, when was that picture even taken? Like, it doesn't look like that inside, but the place is one of those.
I like this, but that's awesome. I want to go there.
This is the place. It is always listed in like one of the most like Pennsylvania's most haunted places is Shank's. And like they've got creepy heads, and that guy with the white hair with the red shirt, you see him, he's the owner. That's Bobby Shank.
Yeah.
And like everything about that story. So where am I going with this? So I used to go to Shank's, like, after I'd ride my bike, and I would just sit there. I would sit at the bar, and like I was the weirdo. Like everyone's talking to everyone. It was like a square bar, and what I love that about it, where you could see everyone across, and I could just sit there, and I'm like a fly on the wall, and I'm listening to people, and just like all these sort of things. I love that. And so there's this other guy there. So I was, this is 5 years ago. I'm 45 years old. And there's another guy who used to come. And he was known simply as Indian John. And John was like incredibly like knowledgeable and proud of his Irish heritage. That's not why he was called Indian John. It was because he was a world-renowned expert on Native American artifacts. And in every way, like both in terms of like finding them, refurbishing them, and then buying and selling them. Like, he was like, if serious collectors would go through him because he had access to all the greatest stuff. And this guy was the character of characters. He was probably like, in his 70s. And just the way he talked and told stories, like, knew like the most knowledgeable person I've ever met, entertaining, incredibly dapper, dressed, but in this strange way, spent the entire 1960s living out of a van, like, going down to Mexico, cultivating mushrooms or cactus and bringing it back. Like, that was his life. Spent 10 years raising his family, like on a farm, like in West Virginia, and like all this sort of stuff. So this guy was like, he was my favorite in Shanks, and everyone knew him in Shanks. And like, he was a little bit of a drinker. But like, this was that guy, and he played in my life. This very, very kind of like important role to me. Like, I recognized him. He liked me, and he and I would always talk, and I would tell him kind of like my take on a lot of the stuff of the Susquehanna and the Susquehannocks. And he was by the book, like, historian. So he didn't like to get too mystical, even though he was mystical as can be. But we had a great rapport. He was kind of fatherly figure for me. And I love that. I never had a grandfather, so he was like my grandfather for me. And I like that. So this guy who shows up last week is the MF. You know what MF stands for? Motherfucking. That's motherfucking in Pennsylvania. He was the motherfucking image of this man. Wow. Like, in terms of stature, like the way they're, like the shape of their bodies, how they moved, the tone of their voice, how they talked to other people. They both were like really like handsome, like dashing looking, like distinguished looking, like older men. Like, everything was the same. And this guy shows up. And in both of those men, like, I could see myself in them. Like, there was a part of me, like, if you're able to like look at yourself at like maybe archetypically, and you can see yourself in other people, like, oh wow, I share that archetype, and you can learn. That's like one of the neat things. Like, if you're not too tied to like who you are, you can see yourself and learn from others. And so that was this guy, Indian John, and this other guy shows up, and as soon as I see him, I'm like, motherfucker. And he shows up at my life now, right in the midst of this like strange period of the eclipse window, and like this me like internally saying like, I want to be still. What do I want to do? What do I want to do? And this guy who shows up is he's like living the, I'm going to say this, quote unquote, living the dream. Because we talked about this a little bit earlier before we got on topic, Emily. And it was like, you're like, Michael, I know you well enough now to know your cycles. Sometimes you don't want to do anything. And that's true. And like, I feel this, I'm like, do I want to do this? What I want to do? All these sort of things. And so here we have this guy shows up, and I know this guy, and this is a recurring theme. He's, you know, he plays the role of my grandfather who I've never had. And he shows up and he was like really, really successful in the material world. Like he checked off all of those boxes. He was like, you know, at age 50, I got my Porsche and I had this business and I had all this success. And he's like, 7 years ago, I just walked away from it all. And since then, I've been living out of my van. I've been like traveling around. It's just me and my dogs. And I've just been surrendering to life. Like I have stripped myself of everything so I can live in the now.
Yeah.
And so when I'm in these periods where I'm like, what do I want to do? Do I want to do this? I don't want to do this. Like, oh, there's too. And then like you create this fantasy, or at least this is what I do. This is what I think most people do, is when they're in a place and they're like feeling like, they're like, you know, I feel stuck, or I feel not satisfied, or whatever those words may be, is like you create these fantasies of like, you know, what if this is what I was doing? And so this gift was given to me. This gift shows up on my doorstep. And I see it, like I know the person, I see myself in them. I know it, like I could trust this, like my grandfather, and it's living all of this. And we spent all this time together. And it's like, you know, this wonderful human being. And I walked out of it and I'm like, I really